Hi and welcome to CoBB. We know this isn't normally what you hear at the top of any episode of ours so far, but this one is special. We're coming up on our 50th episode, and Sudeep and I really want to thank you for listening, for the comments you've sent, for the feedback you've given us, and especially for the suggestions of the topics you've made, because that's where we sometimes struggle because we don't know what to talk about, and we've leaned on you to tell us what you want to listen, and that's helped us a big deal. And going forward, we'd love to organize this a little better.
So, guys, the idea is to try and get to know you and your preferences better. And to facilitate that, we'll be putting a form in the show notes as well as in the comments wherever you're listening this podcast from. We request you to share something about yourself as well as some of your preferences and feedback for the show, and that will help us customize the content and make it even more useful for you. Looking forward for this small help from your end and hoping to provide you content that you will continue to love and continue to listen. Thank you very much.
Welcome to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvana Raghavan.
Sudeep, I think we've missed something very important on the show so far.
Mm-hmm.
You are now a TED speaker, and we never once mentioned it on the podcast.
Let me correct you. It is not TED speaker, it is TEDx speaker.
Yeah, it's the same. So, why hasn't that come up on the CoBB so far?
I don't know. I thought it was not relevant.
Really? So, let's talk about that today. How did you end up speaking at a TEDx event?
Interesting. See, I think when we speak about creating brands, and we have spoken about them a lot, if you allow that principle to be applied to yourself, yeah, so therefore then uh, you know the same principles applied, you create some kind of a persona, some kind of a brand for yourself, and sometimes you get lucky, and that's what happened with me. So with this, with the work that I do with you on the podcast, and some amount of marketing courses that I've done along with couple of startups, those kind of created some visibility. And somebody sitting out there in that TEDx chapter at PDU, Pandit Deen Dayal Energy University in Gandhinagar, they thought that I was a suitable candidate to be approached for a TEDx event at their end.
Brilliant. So, I'm going to sit on the side of the listeners today, and you're going to tell us how we can all become TED speakers because all of us just want to be like you.
Nah. Okay. uh, See, the first part is what I just said, that I think when I reached there and when I met fellow speakers, I honestly felt quite inadequate, quite small. Yeah, there were fairly big achievers, and when I say achievers, you know uh, really.
Is that your humility or
No, no,
feigning humility coming to the
let
fore?
me give you some names. Yeah,
Okay.
so there was this boy called Chetan Tambe.
Hmm.
People can look him up on Instagram by the name of Skip with Chetan. So
Hmm.
he is the son of a police constable and belongs from Mumbai.
Hmm.
He's somebody who started. Uh, you know, he used to skip when he was in a judo or a karate class, and he used to like skipping so much that it took it up as a serious practitioner.
Hmm.
And then I didn't know this, but there is a skipping championship. He is a skipping champion of India. He has
Wow.
won a lot of medals for India. He had some 15, 16 medals around his neck, and he's an unbelievable skipper. And then he evangelizes skipping for exercise and to keep yourself fit. He runs classes. So now there are lots of hundreds and thousands of people who take his classes and all of that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So then there was this, I think it was Formula 4 F4 champion from India, somebody called Mira Erda.
Hmm.
So she races, and you know, and has won a number of championships, yeah, internationally also. Then you must have heard of father of Indian space program, Mr. Vikram Sarabhai.
Right.
His son, Kartikeya Sarabhai, yeah,
Okay.
is a Padma winner, and he's on, he represents India on many climate forums. So he's a green, you know, green representative or green activist, etc. Yeah,
Okay.
and has significant say in some green policies and all of that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
then there was this boy. If you have seen Tarak Mehta Ka Ulta Chashma, there was this character called Tappu there.
Mm-hmm.
That boy is all grown up now, so that boy was also there. So these are all guys who have, kind of achieved a lot in their life, yeah, coming from nowhere and have reached somewhere, etc. So I honestly felt very, very inadequate when I was sitting there. But in any case, for a little while I had that imposter syndrome. But then, I'd chosen a topic which I thought was very close to my heart, and I reconciled with the fact that possibly there are very few people who will be able to talk about this topic with as much conviction as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And hence I said, even if I don't belong at this stage, the topic certainly does.
Wow. Wow.
Mm. So therefore I said that, I'm the messenger, but the topic has to travel, and hence therefore that is how I reconciled with it.
Wow. So, what was the topic that you spoke about?
So I spoke about everybody should be a marketer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
That's
now
perfect.
bringing it home to what we usually do, and hence I thought it was relevant to have this discussion. So I wanted to talk about the fact that everybody, regardless of their profession or their stage in life and whatever they do, should become, should become marketers, should become conscious of the fact that at the end of the day they are either selling or marketing one thing or the other, and hence
Hmm.
it is very critical for everybody to hone the marketer in themselves.
Okay. Fair enough.
That's what I was delivering. And then I went on to say that how is it that you can hone your marketing skills, how can you become a better marketer. And some of those, principles that I spoke about are the things that we spoke about earlier in one of our podcasts,
Hmm.
about 4 or 5 qualities of a good marketer. You remember,
Yes.
yeah, we spoke about intellectual humility, comfort with ambiguity, being king without a crown, etc., etc.
Right.
And in that one also we spoke about how can one practice some of these things at their end, very
Hmm.
simply by looking into the mirror, by reading out from a newspaper, etc., etc. Those are the things that I spoke about, and the whole purpose of the talk was to try and give examples to people which can, make marketing skills seem very easy. So that was the purpose. So therefore that's what I did.
So,
uh,
basically, any of our episodes are worthy of becoming a TED talk in themselves.
yeah, of course. See, not just an episode, any of our conversations, anybody's conversations, when all of us say something or discuss something, it is coming somewhere from deep within us, from our conviction.
Right.
And now, as long as you can create your conviction into some form of a principle which you think applies to larger masses, it certainly can become a subject of an essay or a research paper or a TED talk, as you
Mm.
please.
Fair enough. But getting more serious now
Hmm.
about your talk itself.
Hmm.
When you said everybody must be a marketer,
Hmm.
what exactly do you mean by it? I'm sure you don't mean the profession.
What I really meant was that, regardless of whichever profession you are in, suppose you're a surgeon, you started off taking up a noble profession. You want to make sure that as many people as possible are able to avail that service.
Hmm.
Now, to be able to do that, you would have to convince a few hospitals to empanel you. So, to be able to convince them, you would have to show them something, talk to them about something, etc., etc. You will, therefore, you will finally sell your skills and your experience. That selling needs to be done in an effective manner. Those who are able to do it effectively are able to close the deals, are able to move forward, are able to get acceptance very fast.
Hmm.
You're a student trying to get into a university, you are
Right.
selling yourself, right? You are a,
Hmm.
whatever, you are a professor, you're trying to sell concepts, you're trying to sell the concept of learning to your students.
Would it be right to say you're talking about communication, being very clear about your communication?
So I'm saying that everybody is trying to sell a product or a service or an idea. And selling a product or a service or an idea requires some amount of skill, and requires what you just said, communication.
Right.
Being mindful of the communication is very critical, and that
Mm-hmm.
is what honestly marketing is all about. Yeah, we've said this in the past, Sharon, that I believe that marketers, regardless of whatever you're selling, product, service, what you're selling honestly is conviction.
True.
Yeah, and there are three stages of it. You first convince yourselves, then you convince people all around you, and then you convince the world at large.
Mm.
Yeah, so once you've developed your own conviction by looking at data, using your gut, meeting the consumers yourself, etc., etc., then the next two stages require you to communicate.
Mm.
Yeah, and hence being mindful of these three-step process, and then being mindful of your communication is all about marketing. That's what marketing is all about.
Got it.
Yeah, and hence that is something that I wanted to land, that this is what you have to do. Now I
Mm.
didn't get into mm, communication as such too much,
Okay.
but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted people to be able to, you know, hone their skills, which will lead them to be a better marketer, better communicator, etc.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now, sticking to the point of communication itself, right?
Mm,
Now, I'm not sure about the audience you had for the speech that you gave at the TEDx event,
mm.
but would your speech be different for a different audience? Should it be different? The reason I ask this question is that a lot of the time we engage in communication in life in general. The biggest problem we face is that, yeah, they don't get me. They're not getting my point. So, would your speech have changed for a different audience?
See, let's start from first principles.
Okay.
I would say that talking about communication, one can, I would like to structure it saying that communication can be divided into two big chunks.
Mm.
First is context, second is content.
Okay.
Yeah, when you put these two together, that is how your communication gets crafted.
Mm.
Now, context is all about the audience, like you're saying. Yeah,
Okay.
content is the crafting of the deep conviction or the message that you want to give to them.
Okay.
And the reason you cognize of these two is my first point to say that the responsibility of effective communication lies on the originator of the communication.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're a politician and you're trying to convince a particular constituency to vote for you, the responsibility to effectively communicate and making sure that they get convinced lies on the politician and not on the masses.
Mm.
Now, a politician might become, uh, you know, might become a bit haughty and say that, I am trying to communicate the best that I can, but these guys are completely uneducated and they are unable to understand me. That's not
Mm.
going to give him any kind of success.
Right.
Yeah. Similarly, and this is usually my pet peeve with a lot of the college professors, that they had, when they were doing their PhD or when they became professor or sometime later, they create their notes.
Mm.
Yeah. And those are the same notes that they use for the next 20-25 years a lot of the time. Yeah. So
I
while,
know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah. So therefore, a lot of them have teaching styles, teaching aids that they're stuck on to for a fairly long period of time, while the
Hmm.
generations have changed. And hence, you will find a lot of them complaining that the newer generation doesn't listen to us, they don't concentrate, they have the concentration or that attention time span of a goldfish, etc., etc., right? So now, and therefore their content is oblivious of context. Yeah, a lot of the,
That's very clearly put.
yes. So now a lot of the, new age content, the reason some of the, some of the startups are able to sell their content to working professionals, to students, etc., is because they understand the context. People are hungry for knowledge.
Hmm.
Yeah, so, see, such is the irony of life. There are enough and more people hungry for knowledge, students hungry for knowledge. The
Right.
internet consumption, data consumption is going through the roof, yet
Right.
colleges and schools experience disinterested students. There is some systemic flaw, right?
Absolutely.
And I believe it lies in the difference. The difference is effective communication.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
The
That's
content is all there. You are not going to change Newton's law of physics for sure. But the teachers that we remember are the ones who are able to contextualize it very well.
absolutely. I think all of us have a favorite teacher,
Yeah,
and invariably we would have done well in those subjects those teachers taught us.
correct. But you remember them because they were able to teach you well, because they contextualize their subject so well that you just got it. I remember we had this chemistry teacher who used to teach us principles, organic chemistry principles, in the form of a shairi. Now, somebody who takes that effort is bound to be remembered.
Absolutely.
Context and content,
Hmm.
and the responsibility of effective communication lies on the initiator of the communication. The communicator is supposed to spend a lot of time understanding the context and then crafting the content.
Thank you for listening to CoB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's CoBBCAST.net.
So when you asked me that who was the audience that was seated at that TEDx chapter event,
Hmm.
so honestly, who was sitting there was it is immaterial.
Hmm.
When I thought about it, all of those guys were students from that university. Some of them, then their
Fair.
professors and some more guys who had come from outside.
Hmm.
But more importantly, finally, the speech is going to be uploaded on YouTube, and
Hmm.
a lot of people in within the public are going to see it.
It's a
I hope,
universal audience, right?
yeah, I hope they do. But
Hmm.
let's just assume, without being too modest or humble, that a lot of universal audience is going to see it. So therefore, that is going to be bulk of my audience, and hence my content was not for the audience that was sitting in front of me, but for the audience that is going to be exposed to the speech on YouTube.
Right. Got
Yeah,
it.
so that's how
Okay.
I crafted my content. In general, when you're drafting your communication, your context is extremely critical. There is a reason why negotiators is an expert job.
Okay.
Yeah, people who negotiate are the one who understand context very well. They are
Hmm.
also able to understand the other party's context, right? You must have heard this story. We all had this story possibly in our MBA books, in this chapter around negotiation, where there's this situation where you want to negotiate with a company based in somewhere in Middle East. This is an American company which is trying to negotiate with them. Now they take a negotiator along. The negotiator insists that they reach the venue before the Middle Eastern guys. And once they do, they just sit and observe while the Middle Eastern guys pour into the room. And the negotiator stands up and addresses the last person who enters the room, gives him utmost respect, and then puts forward his proposal. Because he had the idea that in Middle East, it is usually the eldermost or the seniormost guys stand back, they let everybody enter, then they make the grand appearance.
Oh,
Vis-a-vis Americans, where possibly the most important guy leads the way and everybody follows them.
right.
Yeah, and therefore he
Wow.
knew who to speak to.
The cultural context.
Simple. Similarly, all of us must have heard of this Coca-Cola ad that did not do well at all and they had to pull it off in Middle East. A simple print commercial where a guy is roaming around in desert. He is trying to look for water. He's not able to find anything. Then from very far he sees something shining. Then he discovers it's a Coke bottle and he drinks Coke, and then he's happy and he's enjoying in the desert, in the same miserable desert that he was. And they put it up in
Okay.
Middle East. What they forgot was that Middle East reads right to left rather than left to right. So the ad became that the guy was very happy, drinks Coke, gets lost in the desert, sees a mirage, and then he's miserable.
No, you're joking. Is this really happened?
Oh, of course it happened.
I'm going to look up the link for this.
Again, simple context. So I'm just giving you examples of cultural context. But
Got it.
in advertising, in life, in negotiation, anything, any communication that you're doing, Yeah, while we this podcast is known for marketing, but at the core of marketing is communication,
Right.
and communication is critical for anything that you're trying to do in life. Yeah,
Hmm.
the context becomes very very critical. Any ad that you do, any communication that you do, anything that you put out for public, if you understand the context that is going around at that time, what is the political context, what is the religious context, what is the geographical context, etc., the more you contextualize it, the better your content possibly will do. And therefore, my pitch to everybody is to be mindful about the context, because it can make or mar, or it can significantly increase the effectiveness of your content. Once you've absorbed the context, you've empathized with your target segment, you've understood them well, then you have to combine that knowledge with that deep seated conviction in your heart that you're really wanting to communicate, then mix them together to create an effective content.
Okay.
Yeah, so for example, while I was I'll give you two examples from my own experience. When I was
Sure.
the gems brand manager, and when I used to talk to kids, talking to a kid is very different from talking to an adult. Either ways, none of them has any interest in talking to you, but the kids have their mind constantly buzzing with ideas. So if you bore them even for 10 seconds, they
Get
will
out.
not be courteous to sit there and still give you some time. They will just run away. I had to communicate very, very differently because I understood the context, and
Hmm.
hence I would keep some of my cue cards at the top of my head, that as soon as I see their attention wandering, I would throw that cue card. Now, some of those cue cards, therefore, were sports,
Hmm.
Benton, CID, Tarak Mehta Ka Ulta Chashma. I knew some of these things which will be able to hook them, but and therefore I had to be ready with them. Yeah. So therefore, the questions that I'll also ask them is that, अगर टप्पू ने ये किया तो क्यों किया होगा? Or if you
Hmm.
show this to Tappu, what will you tell him?
Got it.
Yeah. So again, the context, and therefore customizing the content. Similarly, when you give a TED talk, and this is something that I discovered when I went there. Number one, the camera is trained on you. You have a red circle. You're
Hmm.
supposed to stand on the red circle and deliver your entire presentation. Now, I am comfortable moving around on the stage, but I just got to know there when I landed there that I can't move around. I can only stand in that red circle. Yeah, so
Right.
that was a little bit of a discomfort for me, but nevertheless. The second thing was that, now that I am supposed to be delivering this and I don't have any paper, etc., in front of me,
Hmm.
and I was supposed to almost deliver an 18-minute thing in front of everybody, I
Hmm.
have to be thorough with my content.
Right.
And then, while understanding the context, I said, okay, they told me that I can have slides, or I can
Hmm.
let the slides be. So I decided that let me have slides, but the slides will be very, very bare,
Hmm.
and none of the slides will have more than 4 words.
Okay. Why was that?
Yeah, so because what I wanted was, I understood that whatever I will craft my speech in a manner such that I'm packing it with very specific words and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't want people reading through my slide, yeah,
Hmm.
and thinking that I am a bozo because they can read faster than I can say. And number two, I didn't want them distracted,
Hmm.
but the slide should tell them which topic am I speaking about.
Hmm.
So if I'm speaking about intellectual humility, the slide will only have the words intellectual humility and possibly
Hmm.
an image that indicates intellectual humility. That's it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how I decided. Yeah. If this was just a marketing audience, specifically marketing audience,
Mm-hmm.
then I might have decided my slides slightly differently. Yeah, I might have possibly put a marketing example there, or some kind of a advertising there, or some kind
Hmm.
of a cartoon there, etc., etc. And the purpose of that would have been that once they see it, it just lands the point within the marketing context, because I know these
Right.
guys are interested in marketing. But here I had to be mindful of the fact that it could be anybody who
Even the
would be watching.
non-marketers.
Yeah,
Hmm.
non-marketers also. So that was the you know understanding the context and therefore crafting my content. And within content, I think one has to be mindful about verbal as well as behavioral content.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of the times we think communication is what we say, Communication is the entire package of how we act and what we say.
Are
Yeah,
you
so
talking about body language
both,
or
yes.
something more?
Body language, what are you wearing, how are you delivering, how are you behaving while you are talking or when you are communicating, etc., also is an important component of communication. So I just wanted to make sure that your context would also impact some of these things, right?
Hmm.
Now
Okay.
suppose you're talking to people living in villages,
Hmm.
yeah, and somebody who's not really well to do,
Hmm.
and you want to deliver them some message which tells them that you understand them and you empathize with them.
Hmm.
And if you're delivering that message while wearing a gold plated watch with branded clothes, etc., etc., of course the message could be great, but what you're doing is you're putting your credibility at risk then. Yeah, you might come across as somebody who doesn't really empathize and you're only paying lip service. Yeah,
Hmm.
and hence, communication experts would advise you that dress appropriately, sit appropriately, talk appropriately, something which does not throw them off. Why? A lot of the times you say that I'm being genuine, I'm being authentic, this is me.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's fine. But the reason you're doing this is that you want to land your message, you want to be an effective communicator. That is the primary objective. Everything else is subservient to it.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
So you would dress according to the the context again, in
yeah,
which,
yeah.
for
So I thought
example,
through that. I'm
hmm,
just telling you what are the things that I paid attention to.
okay,
Yeah, I thought through that, and therefore I said, what should I be dressed as?
hmm,
Yeah, what would help people take this message in the manner that I need them to without any distraction.
okay,
And finally, therefore, I said that I'll possibly wear formals, a shirt and a trouser and a belt and a leather shoe, etc. So that
hmm,
they see that this is somebody who possibly looks a little bit credible.
hmm,
And I made sure that at the start of my speech, I threw in the number saying my 17 years of experience in marketing, etc., etc., just to build that credibility.
hmm.
Yeah. So that
Got it.
becomes one more aspect of it from a communication or a you know content point of view. The last bit specifically on this, Sharon, is something around how many messages do you want to pack
Hmm,
and how much repetition do you want to do on each message.
hmm.
Yeah, again, depending on what is the kind of audience that you're talking to, your approach could change. You're talking to research scholars, they would want to go deep. You pick up one topic, give them depth, 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 right?
Right.
A lot of the time when you're talking to general public, you don't want to go so deep.
Hmm,
You want to land the principles along with examples.
right.
Yeah, so therefore you want to give them the entire structure, give them principles and examples, and then possibly repeat those principles again
Hmm,
so that they remember now that they've got the examples. So therefore your content hence has is a multifaceted object,
right.
and all of those facets are impacted by context.
Hmm,
Once you understand the context, then you're able to construct your content in this manner.
right.
Yeah. Something that I learned once, and this is something that I've not mastered yet,
Hmm,
and I would like to do it in some of the speeches that I do after this, is that they also spoke about saying that if you know your audience, great. If you don't know, then you will obviously think that I'm talking to universal audience. Now, universal audience comprises of people who engage with different things differently,
right.
and they put across the fact that there are a lot of people who get engaged by numbers.
Hmm,
Then there are people who get engaged by visuals, diagrams, such. There are people who get engaged by sound. There are people who get engaged by sight.
right.
And hence, an effective communicator, if you listen to them ever, would almost paint the picture of the situation in front of you.
To cover all the stimuli.
Correct.
Hmm,
So they will, therefore, for example, if they're describing a room full of people, they will say that, you know, there were about 700 people in the room dressed in different shades of blue and gray because it was a formal
formal event.
formally dressed audience, and the room almost smelt of sandwiches and something else which was served at the back of the room. And
Hmm.
then if you could hear through the room, you could hear a little bit of chatter in all corners, with murmurs, slowly rising till the point they reached a crescendo, and then they would suddenly go down, and then they would rise. So they would try and describe the sound of the room, the sight of the room, the number of the room, etc., to make sure that all kind of audience remains engaged.
Right, right,
Yeah, and hence there is a lot of science that can go into structuring your content so that you deliver it in a manner that it becomes, achieves its pinnacle of effectiveness.
right.
Yeah, so that
It's
is, in short, Sharon, my some of the things that I learned, thought about when I was going about this TEDx that you referred to.
awesome. So I'm going to sum this up. I'm going to try and sum this up. You started off by telling us the topic, which was how everybody must be marketers, and the focus being communication. In communication, you said the context of the audience is very important, and how you prepared for a universal audience of people not just sitting there in front of you, but also for the YouTube audience who will be watching the video at a later date. And by the way, can we have the link as part of the show notes here for that?
It hasn't been published yet.
Oh,
The TED team takes about 6 to 7 weeks to scrub through the content,
okay.
and they go through it to see whether there is any religious or sentimental
Okay.
or some psychological content which can be deemed harmful, and therefore they want to go through it and then clear it, which I've
Awesome.
been recently informed that the TED team has cleared it, and now the finally the TEDx chapter is now just finalizing the video and putting it up.
So when it's up, we'll have the link in the show notes.
Yes, we will.
But going beyond the context, what I quite enjoyed was on the content part, you did not speak about the content at all, because you said the content must have been registered with the speaker or the communicator even before the conversation starts. But what you focused was on structuring the content in different ways: your body language, the way you dress, the way you reach out, and with the way you stimulate different senses of the audience so that everybody is looped into the conversation. So I thought that was lovely. And if people can believe that even Sudeep Chawla can have an imposter syndrome and how he overcomes it in the face of adversity, and if they can realize that every episode of Cobb is worth a TED talk, and how after having listened to this, they too can be ready for their own TED talk, I think our job is done.
Now that you put it that way, okay. Okay, thanks, Sharon.
Thank you for all the knowledge, Sudeep.
Thank you for listening to CoB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharvana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's CoBBcast.net.